When that simple cleaner showed to be the most powerful person in the building, no one could believe it. The office of Hathorn and Beck was in its typical morning hustle. Executives hurried by, balancing coffees and cell phones, while discussions about important meetings filled the air. Evelyn entered through the side door, pushing her cleaning cart with firm, precise movements. To everyone else, she was just another invisible piece in the corporate scenery. Her dark green uniform, worn from years of use, was like armor hiding her true role in that place. She walked through the bright hallways, straightening papers left, carelessly on desks and wiping glass surfaces, with the skill of someone who had been doing this for years. No one acknowledged her, except for a brief and automatic thank you from a distracted receptionist. Evelyn listened to the comments like background noise. It was always the same. Talks about record profits, imminent promotions, and rumors about who would next fall into the graces or misfortunes of Alan Greeves, the feared CEO. With each step, with every task executed flawlessly, she gathered pieces of a reality that others ignored, a corporate culture that thrived at the expense of its workers. She remembered something she had heard the previous week. While waiting to clean the conference room, an executive had whispered, "Is she still here? I thought she had retired." People like that just take up space. Evelyn, as always, did not react. She never reacted. She just lowered her head and continued her work. But that day, something inside her had changed. The breaking point came during a night shift. Evelyn was discreetly cleaning the executive's lounge when she heard laughter coming from a nearby room. Two senior managers were chatting while opening a bottle of whiskey. "It's so easy to cut the dead weight around here," one of them said, laughing. "They don't even notice. They think their jobs matter," the other replied, mocking. "Some even cry when they're fired, as if they were irreplaceable." Evelyn stopped in the hallway, her hands squeezing the cleaning cloth. The words were like knives, cutting through her already frayed patience. She knew they were talking about people like her, invisible, disposable, faceless. She went home that night with a weight on her chest and renewed determination. Sitting at the table in her small kitchen with a cup of tea in her hands, she began to write. Her notes were precise and ruthless. Unethical practices, unjust firings, ignored harassment, manipulated bonuses. Evelyn was creating something that no one in that office would ever expect from her, a plan. The next morning, the scene was the same. Evelyn entered the company with her cleaning cart, her face as calm as ever. But inside, she was analyzing everything. The executive's schedules, the papers left behind. About the tables, the distracted conversations that revealed more than the speakers realized. Passing through the conference room, she heard a loud conversation that was impossible to ignore. "The shareholders' meeting is next week. The board loves Alan's numbers. He's untouchable. No one in their right mind would challenge him." Evelyn tightened her grip on the cart, her thoughts swirling around what she knew and what they clearly didn't. She continued her work. But that night she returned to her kitchen table. With her notebook open, she began plotting the next step. A shareholders' meeting that would change everything, and this time she wouldn't be invisible. The clock read 5:30 a.m. when Evelyn entered, Hathorn and Beck, with the same cleaning cart that had been with her for years. Her steps were firm, but her heart raced. She knew that every move from then on needed to be calculated. With the shareholders' meeting just a week away, every detail would be crucial. As she pushed the cart through the still empty hallways, the last fragments of the senior manager's conversation from the night before echoed in her mind. They think their jobs matter. Evelyn knew it wasn't just about the words. It was about the system that allowed people like them to thrive, at the expense of everyone else. Over the years, Evelyn had become an expert at going unnoticed. Her invisibility was a powerful weapon, allowing her to observe without being questioned. But now she was ready to use it actively. She started with the documents left carelessly on the tables, expense reports, inflated bonus contracts, and even emails open on forgotten computers. Evelyn wasn't stealing anything. She was merely piecing together a puzzle that was already there. In the conference room, while cleaning a table, she found an open notebook with the cover flipped down. The words "record profits with strategic cuts" were scribbled at the top of the page. Next to it, a list of departments that had undergone reorganizations. Evelyn mentally noted the names and areas, knowing they would be useful later. Evelyn knew she would need help to turn her observations into something concrete. That night after work, she made a few calls. Among her contacts were old friends of her husband, including an experienced lawyer, a financial analyst, and a former Hathorn & Beck employee who had been wrongfully terminated. They listened intently. As Evelyn detailed what she knew, "I have evidence of unethical practices, manipulation of financial reports, and mismanagement. But I need guidance to ensure this is taken seriously." The lawyer, a man named Robert, spoke first. "You have something powerful, Evelyn, but you need to organize this information in a way that makes it's hard to ignore them. And above all, you need to present them at the right moment." The former employee, Clara, added, "They would never expect this from you. Use it to your advantage, but be careful. If they realize what you're doing before the right moment, they might try to silence you." Evelyn nodded, feeling the weight of her words. She knew that what she was about to do would require not only courage, but also a patience she had cultivated for years. In the following days, Evelyn continued her usual routine, but with a renewed purpose. She began to pay attention to the executives' movement patterns, who entered and left the rooms, who lingered after hours, and who left important documents exposed on their desks. On Tuesday night, she was cleaning the conference room when she heard a phone vibrating. On the table was an unlocked cell phone displaying a message. "We need to cover the shortfall before the shareholders' meeting. Use the edited report." Evelyn mentally noted the sender and the content before continuing her task. Each day, the picture of the company's toxic culture became clearer. In her small kitchen with a cup of tea beside her, Evelyn began to write the speech she would present at the meeting. Her hand trembled slightly as the words took shape. "For years, I've watched this company thrive at the expense of its employees. But what you didn't know is that I've been paying attention. And now I have the evidence that Hathorn & Beck's success has been built on practices that cannot continue." She repeated these words aloud, adjusting her tone until each sentence sounded firm and controlled. She knew she would have to face Alan Greeves and the board members without hesitation. One night, while looking out the window of her small apartment, Evelyn reflected on how she had gotten here. Her late husband, Martin, always believed in Hathorn & Beck's potential, investing in the company when it was just starting. He believed they could do something great together. But now, Evelyn saw that Martin's dream had been distorted by greed and disrespect. She knew she had the power to change that, not just for him but for all those who had suffered under Alan's leadership. On Thursday, Evelyn crossed paths with Alan in the hallway. He passed by her without even noticing her presence. As she continued pushing her cart, he commented to a colleague, "I'm calm for the meeting. The board will approve everything without questioning. They trust me blindly." Evelyn paused for a moment, watching Alan disappear down the hallway. She tightened her grip on the cart and murmured to herself, "They won't trust you for long." She knew the meeting would be the stage where everything would change. Evelyn was ready. Hook. With all the pieces in place, Evelyn prepares to reveal her true position in the company and expose the unethical practices she has observed for years. But will she be able to face Alan Greaves's pressure and power in the boardroom? The day of the shareholders' meeting finally arrived, bringing with it an almost palpable tension in the air. The executives of Hathorn & Beck strutted through the hallways with inflated confidence, their conversations full of record numbers and expectations for another year of exorbitant profits. Alan Greeves, as always, was at the center of it all, radiating his typical arrogance. For him, the meeting was merely a formality. The shareholders would listen to his speech, applaud the results, and crown him once again as the man taking the company to the top. No one paid attention to Evelyn as she pushed her cleaning cart through the well-lit corridors. Her face was calm, but inside she felt every muscle tense. The dossier she had prepared was hidden inside a simple folder in her cart, ready to be revealed at the right moment. As she walked towards the conference room, she mentally went through the speech she had rehearsed so many times. It was now or never. When she entered the room, the board members were already gathered around the long, polished table. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Dallas, and the sunlight reflected off the horizon like a symbol of the grandeur that Hathorn and Beck prided itself on displaying. Evelyn crossed the room silently, positioning a water jug on the side table. None of the present even glanced up. To them, she was part of the scenery, nothing more than a cleaner. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the air unexpectedly. Heads turned, some confused, others clearly irritated by the interruption. Alan, sitting at the head of the table, raised an eyebrow, his condescending smile appearing almost reflexively. "We are in the middle of something important. If you're not here to clean something, I suggest you leave." Evelyn did not move. Instead, she took a step forward and placed the folder on the table. The Hathorn and Beck logo was emblazoned on the cover, along with the words, "Shareholders Report." The silence that followed was so heavy, it felt as though the air in the room had shifted. "I know exactly what's happening here," Evelyn began, her voice steady yet composed. "And that's why I'm here." Alan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, clearly amused by Evelyn's audacity. But his smile faltered as she continued. "For years I have watched this company thrive at the expense of its employees. I have seen unethical practices swept under the rug. I have watched people being treated as expendable, like tools to satisfy the greed of those in power. And I stayed silent until now." A murmur spread around the table. One of the board members leaned forward, frowning. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn opened the folder and began distributing copies of the documents she had prepared. Inflated expense reports, lists of unjust firings, ignored harassment complaints, and contracts that only benefited the leadership. Each page was irrefutable, proof of what she had been observing over the years. "This," Evelyn said, holding one of the sheets in the air, "is the real cost of this company's success." Alan, now clearly uncomfortable, tried to regain control. "Who do you think you are coming here to make these accusations? You are just a janitor." Evelyn raised her gaze, her eyes locked onto his with a calmness that seemed to shake the entire room. "No, Mr. Greeves, I am the majority shareholder of Hathorn and Beck, and today I am using my power to ensure you do not remain in charge of this company." The revelation hit like thunder. Alan's face lost all color as he tried to process Evelyn's words. Murmurs around the table grew louder, and board members began to flip through the documents Evelyn had presented, expressions of doubt quickly shifting to concern and, in some cases, shock. "This is absurd," Alan shouted, standing up abruptly. "You can't do this." Evelyn kept her composure. "I have enough evidence to justify your removal, and I have the power to call for a vote on it. This board can decide whether to support a leader who destroys the integrity of the company or to do the right thing." Chaos erupted in the room. Executives began to debate, their voices overlapping. Some defended Alan, trying to downplay the evidence, while others, struck by the amount of proof, knew there was no denying the seriousness of the situation. Evelyn remained still, waiting for the emotions to settle. When they finally managed to organize the vote, the result was clear. Alan Greeves was ousted from his position as CEO. He protested, his voice laden with indignation, but the board members, pressured by the evidence and the impact the scandal would have on the company's reputation, stood firm. Alan was escorted out of the building by security, his once commanding presence now reduced to a defeated figure. Evelyn stayed in the room, her back straight, watching as the executives who had previously ignored her now looked at her with a mix of respect and guilt. But she was not there to gain their approval. She was already thinking about what would come next. Hathorn and Beck was wounded but not destroyed, and Evelyn was determined to make that place something she could be proud to lead. As she left the meeting room, folder in hand, Evelyn felt a quiet peace. For the first time, she was no longer invisible. She was the symbol of a change no one had foreseen. But there was still much to be done. The news of Alan Greaves's ousting spread through Hathorn and Beck like wildfire in a dry field. The next morning, the halls was buzzing with murmurs of disbelief and speculation. People looked at each other, wondering how the silent Evelyn, the woman who had pushed a cleaning cart through the halls for years, could be the majority shareholder and have ousted the most feared CEO the company had ever known. Evelyn, however, didn't care about the whispers. She walked through the building that day with a demeanor no one had seen before. She was no longer pushing a cart, but holding a clipboard full of notes. There was a plan to be executed, and she had no time to waste. Her first meeting was with the board of directors, now aware that things had changed. When she entered the conference room, she found the board members waiting, some with still skeptical expressions, others trying to appear cooperative. Evelyn began straightforwardly. "From now on, Hathorn & Beck will no longer be the company we know. We will rebuild ourselves. This is not optional. It is a necessity." One board member, an older man named Richard, leaned forward. "Evelyn, no one can deny what you did yesterday. But transforming a toxic corporate culture is not something that happens overnight." Evelyn stared at him, her eyes shining with determination. "I know that, Richard. But every day we lose is another day we allow the same practices to continue. We will start with the most neglected. The cleaning staff, the assistants, all those who have been ignored or mistreated. They will be the first to see real changes." Evelyn's proposal was met with mixed looks, but she had expected that. Some board members were still stuck in the old mindset, concerned only with profits and appearances. But she knew she would have allies, even if few, and that was enough. As she left the meeting, Evelyn crossed paths with Clara, a young cleaning staff member who looked at her with a mix of admiration and hesitation. "Thank you, Miss Evelyn, for what you did," Clara said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't think any of us ever thought something like this could happen." Evelyn smiled warmly. "Don't thank me, Clara. There's still much work to do." As she continued down the hall, Evelyn began to put her ideas into action. She gathered the HR team and demanded immediate changes. Salaries for the cleaning staff and other underappreciated workers were adjusted to reflect the increased workload and years of neglect. Evelyn also brought in an external team to review harassment and discrimination policies, something that had never been taken seriously under Alan's leadership. She implemented training programs for all levels of the company, focused on ethics, empathy, and respect. During one of those sessions, Evelyn decided to participate personally, sitting next to employees of varying levels. Some of them seemed uncomfortable with her presence, but she quickly interrupted her presentation. "Evelyn, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but these radical changes might put us at risk. We need to be careful about how we implement them." Evelyn took a deep breath and responded calmly. "Richard, I understand your concerns, but if we don't adapt, we risk falling behind. Our competitors are evolving, and we must do so as well." The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. She could sense that some were starting to reconsider their positions. After a brief pause, she continued, "Change is never easy, but it's necessary. I promise that we'll proceed thoughtfully and strategically. Our goal is to foster a healthier environment where everyone can thrive." Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. Richard nodded, albeit reluctantly, as other board members began to express their support. Evelyn felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this was the turning point she had been waiting for. As the meeting adjourned, she made her way back to her office, feeling a mix of exhilaration and exhaustion. The weight of expectations was heavy, but she was ready to carry it. She knew that building a more inclusive and innovative culture would take time, but she was committed to the journey. Later that evening, Evelyn reflected on the day's events. Change was indeed a challenge, but she felt more determined than ever to see it through. She picked up her phone and started drafting an email to her team, reiterating her vision and encouraging them to share their insights. Together they would navigate this transformative journey, raised a question that seemed calculated to discredit her. "Evelyn, we all recognize that salary increases and changes in HR are helping employee morale, but have you considered how this will affect our profits in the long run? The company cannot thrive if we spend too much on, sentimental things." Evelyn remained calm, but her eyes reflected unwavering determination. "Richard, the changes we are implementing are not sentimental. They are strategic. A motivated and respected team is more productive, more loyal, and ultimately more profitable. The numbers you value so much will start reflecting this soon. She paused, letting her words echo in the room before continuing. Furthermore, we are correcting years of neglect. Neglect that, if ignored, would have cost us more than any investment we are making now. The room fell silent, and even Richard found no immediate answer. Evelyn knew she would still need to prove her point, but she was confident that the results would speak for themselves. As she left the meeting room, she was approached by Anna, the new HR manager, who had been promoted under her leadership. "Ms. Evelyn, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to share something with you. We have seen a significant increase in the number of candidates interested in working here since the changes began. It seems that people are starting to see Hathorn and Beck differently." Evelyn smiled. It was a small victory, but each step forward made her more motivated. Later that same day, Evelyn organized one of the open meetings she had implemented. This time the room was full, with employees from different levels and departments. Many were there for the first time, still uncertain about what to expect. Evelyn began the meeting with her characteristic tone, direct and firm. "I want everyone here to know that your voices matter. This is a space to share ideas, concerns, and experiences. Nothing you say will be ignored. This company is as much yours as it is mine, and together we will shape its future." A young man raised his hand. It was Lucas, one of the interns who had previously seemed too intimidated to speak. "Ms. Evelyn, I wanted to thank you for creating this space, but I also wanted to ask, how do we ensure that these changes continue even after the focus shifts?" Evelyn nodded, impressed by the depth of the question. "That's a great question, Lucas. The answer lies in building a strong and transparent system. We cannot rely on one or two people to keep things running. We need policies and practices that are strong enough to withstand time and circumstances, and that's why all of you have a role in this." She looked around the room, her eyes passing over each face. "You are the guardians of this change. No one should convince them that their efforts are insignificant. Every action we take together is a brick in the construction of something greater." The room erupted in applause, and Evelyn saw that little by little she was gaining the trust of those who needed her most. However, Evelyn knew there was still one last barrier to face: external investors. Many of them had become restless with the changes, fearing that the new practices would interfere with financial results. Evelyn scheduled a meeting with the major shareholders to present her long-term plan and, more importantly, to show the initial results of the changes. In the conference room, facing an audience of serious and mostly skeptical investors, Evelyn began her presentation. She displayed graphs indicating a reduction in employee turnover, an increase in productivity, and even an improvement in customer service. But the most powerful moment came when she shared real stories of employees who had benefited from the changes. "This is Clara from the cleaning team. After years of being ignored, she now manages a small team and is directly contributing to improving our processes. And this is Lucas, an intern who, thanks to the new mentoring program, is already leading projects that would have previously been delegated only to experienced executives." She concluded with a clear message. "The success of Hathorn and Beck has always been measured in numbers, but now we are proving that a healthy and fair environment is also a winning formula. I am here to ensure that our company not only survives, but thrives. And thriving means much more than profit." At the end of the meeting, many of the shareholders who had arrived with doubts left convinced that Evelyn was on the right track. One of them, shaking her hand, said, "I never thought I'd say this, but you have turned my skepticism into admiration. Keep it up." As Evelyn returned to her office, she was stopped by Clara in the hallway. "Miss Evelyn, may I say something? You gave us something we didn't have before, hope. Thank you for believing we deserve more." Evelyn smiled, but inside she felt the weight of everything that still needed to be done. She knew that every step forward came with new challenges, but she was ready to face them. She had already proven that the impossible was possible, and she had no intention of stopping now. The following weeks solidified Evelyn's role as a transformative leader at Hathorn and Beck. The implemented changes began to yield visible results, not just in the numbers, but in the daily behavior within the company. The hallways, once filled with tension and condescending whispers, now had an air of renewal. Employees smiled more, interactions were more respectful, and for the first time in years, the company seemed to be functioning as a team. Evelyn knew she had won important battles, and the work of reconstruction was far from over. She called one last board meeting to present a consolidated report of the changes, highlighting the positive impact on financial results and organizational climate. When the meeting began, the board members were engaged in a way that Evelyn had never witnessed before. It was not just respect, it was admiration. She opened the presentation with figures that clearly demonstrated the effectiveness of her initiatives. Employee turnover had dropped by 40%, training costs for new hires had decreased, and productivity had increased by 25%. But Evelyn knew that numbers alone didn't tell the whole story. She continued the presentation by showcasing testimonials from employees at different levels, expressing gratitude for the opportunities they had received and the new culture that had emerged. "These results are not just financial," Evelyn said, looking at each board member. "They are human, and that, gentlemen, is what ensures that Hathorn & Beck will have a sustainable future." When she finished, the room fell silent for a moment before Richard, one of the most skeptical members, stood up. "Evelyn, you not only transformed this company, you transformed all of us. I was one of the doubters, but now I see you were right. Thank you for teaching us to be better." The applause that followed was heartfelt and lasted longer than Evelyn had expected. It was a moment that sealed the success of her leadership. After the meeting, Evelyn gathered her core team in a smaller room to discuss the next steps. Among them were Anna, HR manager, Lucas, now promoted to mid-level analyst, and Clara, who had taken on a supervisory role in the cleaning team. Each of them brought ideas to continue the work they had begun together. "We need to ensure that the changes we implemented are sustainable," Anna said. "That means creating systems that work even when we face new challenges. And we need to keep listening to all levels of the company," Lucas added. "What we've done so far has been incredible, but we can improve even more." Evelyn listened to each idea attentively, taking notes and encouraging dialogue. She knew that the true strength of Hathorn & Beck lay in the people who now had a voice and could contribute their vision for the future. A few days later, Evelyn announced something that surprised everyone. During a general meeting with all the company employees, she took the stage holding an envelope. "More than a decade ago, I entered this company as an invisible figure, and for years I witnessed what many of you faced. I didn't just see, I felt it firsthand. But today I'm here to say that this will not happen anymore. This company is now a place where every voice matters, every person is valued, and everyone has a chance to grow." She paused, opening the envelope and holding a paper in front of everyone. "And to ensure this continues, I am announcing my retirement." As the active leader of Hathorn & Beck, the room was filled with murmurs of surprise. Clara, sitting in the front row, looked at Evelyn with wide eyes. "But don't worry," Evelyn continued. "The company is in good hands. Clara will be the new Chief Operating Officer. Lucas will lead our innovation area, and Anna will continue heading HR, ensuring our culture remains strong. And of course I will be here as an advisor, ready to support whenever necessary." The applause that followed was thunderous, but Evelyn knew that moment was not about her. It was about the future that everyone there was helping to build. When the meeting ended, Clara approached Evelyn, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for believing in me. I never imagined I would be here." Evelyn held Clara's hands and smiled. "Clara, you have always been ready. You just needed someone to see that." That afternoon, Evelyn left the Hathorn & Beck building for the last time as an active leader. The Dallas skyline shone in front of her, but she no longer felt the weight that had accompanied her for so many years. Instead, there was a lightness, a certainty that she had done everything she could to transform the place where she had once been, invisible into something that now represented hope and progress. As she walked through the streets, Evelyn felt her phone vibrate. It was a message from Gabriel, an old friend of her husband. "Martin would have been proud of you. I'm so happy for everything you've achieved. Now it's time to rest. You deserve it." Evelyn smiled, putting her phone in her pocket. Resting would be nice, But she knew her journey was not over. The strength she had discovered within herself would continue to guide her, whether to help others or simply to live the next chapter of her life with the same resilience that had defined her for so many years. As the sun began to set, Evelyn looked at the horizon once more, took a deep breath and moved forward, ready to embrace all that the future had in store for her. She was no longer invisible, and she would never be again.